The side plank, such a classic move for kicking in the abs. But folks, what if I told you that you're probably screwing it up? Go ahead, try your side plank now, and you're probably thinking, Zach, this is easy. Here's a quick test. Are you able to just lift your hand up and wave hi to your boy? If that's you and you're someone who's getting a little bit of elbow discomfort, chances are you're not getting the most out of your side planks. Hello, everybody. Zach Couples, physical therapist here, and there's a lot of key things that I think most of you wonderful, outstanding people, as well as your supreme clientele, are missing out when it comes to getting the most out of side planks. Don't worry, I'm going to show you, first off, why in the heck would you perform and program a side plank, and also, most importantly, how you can get the most out of this exercise, revitalize something that has maybe fallen by the wayside in your programming, and take your side planks to the next level. Let's dive in, shall we?
Even though the side plank is a simple, common move that a lot of people program, there's actually a lot going on with it from a biomechanical standpoint, and I'm going to do my darndest to break it down for you wonderful, outstanding people. Let's look at the start position of the side plank first. And so if I am, let's say, lying on my right side, here, like this, all right? So just by starting on the right side, we can look at where gravity is going to push stuff. Stuff being your abdominal contents and airflow. And so if I use this vinegar bottle to represent the stuff, starting on my side, you can see that gravity is going to push things downward, meaning there's going to be more expansion on the right side of my body, both the visceral contents and air. Then, as I go up and across, as we'll talk about when we discuss performance of the side plank, I'm going to get a rotational action that's going to translate that stuff a little bit more downward and forward. So because of the rotational action that I coach with the side plank, you're actually going to get a little bit more of a bias towards the front of the thorax and the ab wall, meaning there's going to be some anterior expansion that's going to occur with the side plank, and it's going to be biased a bit more towards the downside. So in this case, the right. Anterior expansion is actually going to increase the internal rotation demands of the exercise. How do you know this? Well, the reason why is you can actually tell what an exercise demands by seeing how someone might cheat the exercise. One common thing that I'll see on side planks is people will actually crunch the exercise like that to try to get into position. If you see crunching, that's a way of trying to create an internal rotation based action. And so we can see based on that compensatory strategy that the side plank itself demands internal rotation occurring, and if you can do it like a rock star without having some type of compensatory action like that, you're going to get some anterior expansion. But wait, folks, that's not all. You're actually also going to get some posterior expansion from the side plank on the downside, meaning it's going to demand the right side in this case to blow up front and back. And the reason why that is because if I'm going up and across, I'm rotating the thorax towards the downside, in this case the right. When I rotate to the right, if you look at the spinous processes on the back of the rib cage, it's got to move this way. So stuff on the back is going to stretch out, meaning I will get some degree of posterior expansion. This is going to be magnified by the protraction action, bars, that happens on the downside. When I protract the scap, that's going to kick in serratus anterior, so that's going to compress the rib cage laterally, and that's also going to get that A to P expansion. How do I know that I need some posterior expansion on the downside? I'm glad you asked. Look at the way people will cheat this. One, they might not rotate all the way, but then the other thing that you'll oftentimes see is you'll see people when they perform the side plank is they'll sag down towards the down arm. If you're sagging downward, then that will oftentimes happen to make up for the inability to expand the posterior thorax. A common example of this is sometimes when you see someone reaching forward, they'll tip their torso backwards. Same song and dance here. If I am not able to reach and I sag, it's essentially a way to tip the thorax backwards to give the appearance that external rotation is occurring. So because of gravity and the rotational action, a side plank is going to increase anterior and posterior expansion on the downside in the thorax. And also too, because it is a side plank, I am going to get some lateral compression of the rib cage. This can be beneficial for someone who maybe needs to work on closing their bucket handle action or the lower rib cage, which we see during exhalation. So if you have someone who's a wider infrasternal angle, say, that's going to help them close that angle, and that's why it's a useful exercise. Cool, Zach. Is there a bias more towards the interior or more towards posterior with a side plank? Why, yes. And we have to look at arm position to determine why that is. When I perform the side plank, I actually internally rotate the arm. So I will create a greater internal rotation demand based on the arm position. And I can see why that happens by a lot of the compensatory actions. One compensatory action you might see when someone's doing a side plank is they might actually externally rotate the arm like that. That's a way to minimize the internal rotation demands. Another thing you'll see is when someone's on their side, and we'll talk about this when we go into performance, but they'll oftentimes abduct the arm like that. Again, minimizing the internal rotation demands. You can also see this when someone is able to lift their elbow up and bend it. When they have this and they're not putting most of the force through the entire forearm, well, that's creating pronation, which drives internal rotation throughout the extremity. So if you're not doing that, it could be because they can't create the internal rotation needed to perform the exercise. So here's what we got with the side plank so far. A to P expansion on the downside with a little bit more bias towards the front based on the internal rotation demands. Now, folks, there is something a little bit interesting happening at the elbow as well. Do you ever have someone who's got a large carrying angle of their elbow, meaning that their elbow really flares, or their forearm, really flares out? What's going on there? Well, a lot of times what you see with that valgus is two internal rotation forces coalescing together, and that's what creates the increased valgus action or that large carrying angle in the elbow. We also see this in a lot of places, like if someone's got knocked knees or anything like that, that's an example of local internal rotation. Side planks can actually help mitigate that particular response at the elbow. And the reason why has to do with what happens locally at the elbow joint when I drive forearm pronation at 90 degrees of elbow flexion. General rule of thumb, pronation is associated with elbow extension and internal rotation. Supination is associated with elbow flexion and external rotation of the humerus. But there's something interesting that happens at 90 degrees of elbow flexion. The rotations actually flip-flop. When I pronate the forearm at 90 degrees of elbow flexion, the humerus distally has to externally rotate. Conversely, when I supinate the forearm at 90 degrees of elbow flexion, the humerus distally has to internally rotate. And so, if I am performing a side plank and I'm pronating the arm at 90 degrees of elbow flexion, that will create distal humerus external rotation, which, folks, is useful if you are someone who has a large carrying angle. You actually need to create that external rotation action distally at the humerus in order to take care of that. If I may, let's recap the biomechanical considerations of the side plank. You are going to get lateral compression on the downside, as well as anterior and posterior expansion of the rib cage. It's going to have a little bit more of an internal rotation bias because of the extremity position, and you're also going to drive distal humerus external rotation with any type of side plank variation.
Let's now dive into performing the side plank. And folks, the side plank is a rotational exercise. And if you're getting a ton of elbow pressure, chances are it's because you're limiting the rotational element of the side plank. Because what I want to do is I want to distribute the force of the side plank, which is strong with me, across the entire forearm. And so the major key that you have to do is you have to pivot off of your hand as you do the side plank. When you pivot off your hand, that's not going to cause you to go straight up like most side planks do, which is why you can do that. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to go up and across like an arc of a catapult. So instead of here, I actually want to go here. And now when I do that, I got my pressure distributed across the hand. Look at this, folks. It's significantly harder for me to lift my hand up. And that's because I've gotten that rotational element that we should have in side plank. That's one of the first things that you gotta do. The second thing that you gotta do is you gotta make sure that you're keeping your arm at about 90 degrees of abduction. A lot of ways that people make the side plank easy peasy lemon squeezies, instead of being here, they'll be sagged down like that. And they're like, Zach, I ain't feeling a thing. Folks, it's because you got your arm in a funky position. That's gonna limit the abdominal activity. Simple cue is to just make yourself, your supreme clientele aware. Then you gotta bring yourself up and forward like this, keeping your chest relatively in line with your forearm, just like that. So step one, you gotta make sure that's a catapult arc. Step two, you gotta keep your forearm in line with your chest. Step three, fam, you gotta reach on a side plank. So what I mean by that is once I've gone over the top like Sylvester Stallone, hey, how you doing? Pretty good. Like that, and I've kept my leg or my arm in line with my chest, I gotta make sure I'm pushing away and not sagging down. A lot of times people will sag down. When you sag, that's gonna cause the rib cage to fall more forward, which is gonna limit your abdominal activity during this particular activity. So, I'm gonna go over the top, reach long, keeping the chest parallel, hold, breathe. And during that, I feel a ton of abs, way more than I did if I was just doing this. I can do this for a long time. That's a little bit tougher for you, boy. Now, folks, you might try your side plank that way and you'd be like, whew, Zach, that is really hard. I might not be able to hold it as long as I could other side planks. Do you have any regressions or easier versions that you could incorporate? For you, my wonderful, outstanding fam, I most certainly do. There's a couple ways you can make this easier. Most of them involve changing the leg position. So in the conventional side plank, I got my legs atop one another. I could make this easier by putting one in front of the other. I typically will elect to put the top leg in front because that's gonna help me with the rotational element of the side plank. Because when I put, in this case, my right leg in front of my left, now my pelvis is turned more to the left, which is the turn that I'm gonna be doing with this side of the side plank. So that's a little bit easier. You'll see I'm a little bit less shaky with that. But folks, that might even be too difficult. So what can you do then? I'm glad you asked. If that's a problem, then you got a couple options. One, I could bring both knees up. That's gonna be the easiest, and then I'm gonna now pivot off of not just my hand, but my kneecap. Boom, like that, keeping the same elements, not sagging, not going here, and not crunching. That's another way that people can screw that one up. Especially notice that one during that variation. Or if you're like, Zach, that's kind of easy. What's the middle ground? I'll show you. Straighten the top leg, but keep the bottom knee bent and just hit it up like that. Same cues. Pivot, reach, chest in line with the forearm. If you try those three things, I guarantee you're gonna get way more out of your side plank and no one will mess with you.
Well, there you have it, fam. Those are the major biomechanical and performance keys when performing any type of side plank variation. What struggles have you seen when you've done side planks? Or are you like, where in the heck do I program this with a specific individual? Well, go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe, and comment below so I can help expand upon these topics. And who knows, maybe I'll even do a special video just for you. If you want to learn more about the biomechanics, maybe that part was a little bit over your head, why don't you go ahead and sign up for my seminar, Human Matrix. If you're watching this in 2022, I have 2 dates in the US, May 28th and 29th in Seattle, Washington, August 6th and 7th in Boston, Massachusetts, and also I'm going to be in Slovenia on October 15th and 16th. You can sign up by checking out zachcouples.com/seminars. Or if you just want to learn more from your boy Big Z, go ahead and check me out at zachcouples.com. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. You've been an incredible, outstanding audience, and I hope that you keep real but not to the extent when things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.